Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Anacortes Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs Annual Candidate Forum. My name is Jessica Kaiser. I'm the President and CEO of the Anacortes Chamber of Commerce, and today's forum will provide a revealing look at the races of the Legislative District 10, Position 1 and 2, District 40, Position 1 and 2, and Skagit County Commission, District 3. We also have a couple people in the audience I'd like to recognize that are other candidates or electeds here that are not a part of the forum today. If we could have you wave Dan Matthews, running for Congressional District Number 2. Corin Hamburg, running for Skagit PUD District 3. Sandy Perkins, running for Skagit County Auditor. Danny Hagan, running for Skagit County Assessor. And then we just saw Anacortes Mayor Matt Miller leave, but we also have Anacortes City Council Member Jerry Carter here joining us. So to go over the rules before we begin, a reminder to please turn off your electronic devices. The forum is being live streamed and recorded to be shown on Channel 10 and on the City of Anacortes' YouTube channel. We ask that audience members not record the forum. We have invited all opposed candidates from each race. The candidates are seated next to their opponent if they were able to attend. Please hold your applause until the end of each race. The public was solicited for questions prior to the forum, and due to time constraints, questions will not be taken from the audience during the forum. Introduction and closing statements. In each race, we will begin and end with a 1-minute opening and closing statement by each candidate. To maintain the Chamber's reputation of impartiality, the candidate to speak first for each race was chosen by a coin flip prior to the start of today's meeting. The Government Affairs Committee questions. Following the opening statement, our candidates will be asked a series of questions that were developed by our Government Affairs Committee. Alternating first response positions, each candidate will be given 2 minutes response period to the question posed. Candidate-to-candidate questions. In the second segment of the forum, the candidates will pose their own question to their opponents. In this segment, each candidate will have 1 minute to pose their question to their challengers. Will only have 1 minute to respond. And in this forum, that will be the county positions, as those are the only ones that had both opponents attend. Timing. In order to help our panelists track their response time, we're using handheld signs. First, you will see a 30-second notice, and then you will see a stop notice. This means your time is up. If you fail to stop, you will hear this gentle notification that your time is up. Please begin, let's begin with the candidate introductions. For introductions, we'll go ahead and start with Christian Burns, and then we'll go down the line. 1 minute each. Thank you. Lisa Janicki. Lisa, I think the microphone might not be on. Just a heads up for all of you guys, if you touch the pad,
is that better?
the blue light.
Oh, it's, hey!
All right, sorry, I'll talk faster. Anyway, thank you for being here. I have a background in business. I was the chief financial officer for Janicki Industries and other family businesses before I ran for office, and really from the precept that it was time for our local government to spend more time projecting the future and planning for the future and how to invest in our future. And my goal really is to look at Skagit County and to work with Skagit County to bring systems that are sustainable and that will far outlive my term in office. I am running for a third term to complete some of those projects, and particularly with all the infrastructure money that is out there from the federal government, we have to be responsible with those funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex Rammel.
Thanks so much for hosting this. Thanks to the Anacortes Chamber, and thanks for everybody who's attending. My name is Alex Rammel. I'm state representative for the 40th District. Some of the background and experience that I bring to this work, I'm a single dad and struggle with many of the things that folks are all too familiar with, like finding affordable housing in this part of the country. I graduated from Western Washington University with a degree in environmental policy and planning, and I've worked for the city of Bellingham, helping implement sustainability initiatives. I work for a small business association called Sustainable Connections. And in the legislature, I've been there for 3 years now, and I serve on the Transportation, Finance, Energy, Environment committees. And I also serve as Deputy Whip and a member of the House Democrats leadership team. Looking forward to the conversation tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Clyde Shavers.
Thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and thank you very much for hosting. My name is Clyde Shavers. I am running for the state representative, position 1 in the 10th Legislative District. As a first-time candidate, I'm hoping to usher in a new generation of young public servants, young leaders, and walk away from the politics of the past, the divisiveness and ugliness that we see today. As a Navy veteran and having graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy, I'm fighting for services and benefits for veterans and active duty personnel. As someone who's engaged with a special education teacher, I'm standing up for students, for better opportunities for students, career, technical colleges, and trainings and apprenticeships. As a board member and a volunteer for Skagit Friendship House, I'm standing up for everyone to actually own a place, to rent a place, affordable housing. So today, I'm asking each and every one of you to vote for the candidate who exemplifies lifelong public service. Vote for someone who has studied environmental law, who understands that we need to increase and ensure a clean, healthy environment, sustainable fishing, and sustainable farming. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dave Paul.
Hey folks, thanks so much. I'm Dave Paul. And it's been an honor to serve in the state legislature for the last 4 years. My wife and I live in Oak Harbor. We've got 4 kids. Our 3 older kids just graduated from college, and our youngest is a senior in high school. And when I'm not in the legislature, I'm just blessed to be able to work at Skagit Valley College, where I've worked there for 14 years. And that's really helped inform my work, first by teaching me that the importance of listening to community members, and then going to Olympia and advocating for what's most important for our community, looking for those investments that matter the most. I've worked a lot on education issues, thinking about ways of helping to reduce college debt and have folks be able to earn college credit while they're still in high school. And I think that's really helpful to think about also ways of helping businesses with workforce training and workforce development. Really appreciate everybody coming out this evening and the Chamber for hosting this event. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go right into question number 1, and we have the questions up on the board as well. If you had the opportunity to build bipartisan support for a single bill of your choosing, what would it address, and how would you build your support? We're going to start with Alex. You have 2 minutes.
Well, I'll just talk about the bill that I'm working on right now, with the hope to introduce at the beginning of the next legislative session. So folks may be following along. The Federal Inflation Reduction Act is going to direct a lot of money towards a clean energy economy. in categories like solar photovoltaics, electric vehicles, energy efficiency, and electrification for buildings. Those are all great things, but as somebody I was talking to earlier today put it, it's really hard to figure out what you qualify for your building, and which programs are the right ones for you to choose. So this is modeled on work that I helped lead in Whatcom County to build an energy efficiency retrofit program to help folks navigate all of the things that are available out there, and take advantage of both federal programs, state programs, utility rebates, putting dozens of people to work in the past. We'll be putting thousands of people to work if we can get this up to scale for the whole state. At the same time, we'll be saving energy, reducing pollution, and building a clean energy economy. So in terms of how to build bipartisan support, the only thing you can do is sit down and talk to people. And always, I was just saying earlier tonight, if you sit down with somebody who you think you disagree on everything and you talk for 15 minutes, you find a bunch of things that you agree on and you find common ground. I've been proud that a lot of the work that I've been able to do in the legislature has been done in a bipartisan way. Things like renewable hydrogen, you might not have thought we could find common ground on, but we did that, and we were able to pass that legislation in a bipartisan way.
Thank you. Clyde, same question.
So I work for a nonprofit called Goosefoot, largest nonprofit in South Whidbey, specifically on the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. And we purchased some parcels of land, and we've realized over time that it's very difficult, very challenging to actually build affordable units, affordable facilities. And it's challenging because there are so many obstacles or burdens that are enforced by the state legislature. So my number one priority is to break down these barriers, to remove these obstacles so that other nonprofits and other entities who want to build affordable housing are actually incentivized to build affordable housing. And that may mean, waivers or exemptions for groups that are deemed, or areas that are deemed affordable. We need to make sure that whether it's in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, that when developers and other nonprofit associations show up in Anacortes and Skagit County, they want to build affordable housing. When I speak with young people in Whidbey Island, they are concerned that they won't have a roof over their head. When I speak with old people, they are concerned that they're going to be taxed out of their house one day. And these older folks have lived in that same house for years, for decades. So I think this is a crisis that we need to really look into. And it doesn't mean we should build affordable units everywhere, anywhere. It means we need to really look at what kind of topography, what is the geographic area. We should prioritize density over sprawl, because in the end, we have a great agricultural community, farmers and farm workers, and I'm going to ensure that large housing developments aren't ripping up farmland. We need to make sure that we build these units in job-friendly locations where workforce housing is available in densely populated areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave.
Thanks so much for that question, Jessica. So, so first I would start by working with Democrats and Republicans alike at the get-go for talking about what the issues are and then how best to address them, so that you're not creating a policy in a vacuum. And when you look at my legislation that I have worked on in the past, almost always the number 2 person on that bill is a Republican. So I've gone to talk to my Republican colleagues to find out what their concerns are in that area, and then looking for ways of us working together. And I think right now the number one thing I am hearing talking to voters is concerns over affordability, and especially with housing affordability. I think this is going to be the most important issue that we address in the upcoming session. And I've knocked on close to 3,000 doors myself this election cycle, and it's not only the number one issue talking to voters, but it's also when I'm talking to businesses. that there's such a shortage of housing that they're having a rough time attracting employees into our region. So I think you work together with folks across the aisle, you work with your county and local officials to figure out ways of helping to improve that workforce housing. The great thing about workforce housing is it also helps seniors when they're getting ready to move into their last home. It's the same sort of small home that most of us started with when we first bought a home. And looking for ways of partnering with nonprofits. The work they're doing is amazing. It is not enough, so we're going to have to do more to help streamline that permitting process and help build more ADUs and more multifamily homes within our community. But it's by talking to all those actors and bringing them together and then having a proposal that you build together. Thank you.
Thank you. Christian.
So this is, it's interesting because as a county commissioners, we don't make law. But if I could work with legislators, so what I thought was, I would want to figure out how we can work together to pass a law to change how we deal with wildlife. Specifically here in Skagit County with the issue with the elk. And we also have issues with beavers. And we also have issues with salmon habitat. And so when you have a bunch of citizens in a room and you talk to them, when you talk to those citizens about what it takes to deal with a problem, you would be amazed at the answers you get. People want to have more fish. They like having this wildlife, but it needs to be managed properly. And specifically with the beaver dams, we have issues with the ability to control and deal with them. And so that's an issue with Fish and Wildlife, and actually being able to bring the water level below where it is now, and they just keep getting bigger. Beaver dams don't get smaller on their own. And so if we need to live next to habitat, it needs to not endanger people's homes. With the salmon, I was at a meeting with in Clear Lake, and the room was packed. There was more people than are here now in a room 1/4 the size, and it was very hot. And salmon, they were talking about all kinds of things, but one of the things was dredging, the need of what salmon habitat really is supposed to be, not what the Department of Ecology says it's supposed to be. They're fundamentally different things. Salmon need cool water. They need deep water. They need to have rocks to be able to lay their eggs. And so these fundamental things that are at odds with the way things are, with the way state agencies handle them, is yeah, there we go.
Thank you. Lisa.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's really important that the county commissioners work with their legislators. We're really blessed in Skagit County to have 3 legislative districts, so I always feel like we have a team of 9 down in Olympia working for us. The issue that I would want to bring forward is complementary to some of what you heard from our legislative reps, which is, or candidates, sorry, soon to be rep, is around housing. We just did a ribbon cutting over at in Burlington with the community action, and what was so unique about that, and it's a model that I think we should expand, is a private-public partnership. The money came in from private donations to reconstruct office space into 34 units, 34 apartments, and 1/3 of those units are being reserved for veterans. And the reason that it's so important is that if you can take the public fund of money, so much money is dedicated to our housing and comes out of the state for housing. But what a lot of these affordable units need is someone who can handle the mental health crises that we're also in. So 70 units are being built in Mount Vernon right now that will have 24/7 case management. Those are for people who have been living in the streets or in their cars or over at the Burlington First Step Shelter. But if we could get the capital money brought forward from private sector, investments from the private sector, like the Community Action Project, then those state monies could be freed up to do more of the permanent supportive housing model, where we can support that operations piece of having help for these folks who just really need a place to live. And I will argue that it doesn't matter what level you bring housing in, we need capacity. We're at less than 1%. We're still like 2,500 units short in Skagit County. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 2. In regards to the public safety laws, what amendments would you propose to address the concerns of the district mayors and law enforcement that they have created detrimental effects of increasing crime, drug abuse, and an emboldened criminal element that is making our communities less safe? And we'll start with Clyde.
So I grew up in a family of law enforcement professionals. I'm the son of a police officer, and I have on my dad's side sheriffs as well, people who work in the sheriff's department. So this is very personal to me. I will always support our law enforcement. I will always support the job they're doing, and I will always support more resources and more funding to our law enforcement. But I also support ensuring that we direct that funding in an effective manner. So that means that we provide social workers and mental health professionals and experts to work side by side with our law enforcement professionals. And I have worked, or I've talked with the judicial system here. I have talked with police departments and sheriff's departments here as well. And so what we need is this combined approach to narcotics, for example, where we use drug courts, where we provide them opportunities to actually sober up, opportunities for them to go to rehabilitation. We need to provide more funding for that so that we don't have this continued cycle of young people and older folks resisting, unable to get off of these drugs or narcotics. And the way we do that is just by funding and providing these resources in a more effective manner to our law enforcement professionals. I don't support defunding the police whatsoever. I actually support ensuring that they can do their job right, and so that they can rebuild the bonds of trust for our community members. And by doing that, then we can really start digging into drug abuse, crime increasing in our communities. This is a major issue area, and I look forward to working with the community on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave.
Thank you, Jessica, for that question. So I think this is a really important concern. This is certainly in the top 3 issues that I'm hearing, talking to voters. And we've worked really hard to listen to law enforcement officials and constituents and community groups over the last 2 years. A lot of the work that has been done is a continuation of the work that the Washington voters asked for with the de-escalation initiative that was passed in 2018. And when there is so much that folks agree on that needs to be done. First, I think everybody agrees that everybody deserves to be safe in their community and feel safe in their community. And one of the things, as Clyde mentioned, that we need to do is making sure that we have enough mental health providers and folks that are helping people overcome addiction embedded in our police departments. And when you talk to law enforcement officials, they don't want our jail to be the treatment center. There are better alternatives for folks that are in addiction or experiencing homelessness. So I've been working really closely with law enforcement officials and recently had a meeting with the 3 delegations from Skagit County with our local law enforcement leaders. I think the 2 biggest concerns are addressing the Blake decision, which was the Washington State Supreme Court decision that essentially decriminalized possession of drugs, which nobody thinks is a good idea, and we've got to fix. That was handed to the legislature about halfway through the session last year. And we've got to address ability for police to have common sense pursuits when they need it. I'm proud that the Skagit County Sheriff has endorsed me, the Oak Harbor Police Chief, the Fraternal Order of Police, and the Washington State Troopers. I think that's a testament of the work we're doing to try to listen to folks and then find common sense solutions that work for both police and the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Christian.
So I also grew up in a home with a state patrol police officer. My dad's out he retired from the state patrol. And so I grew up in a home with a law enforcement officer. I can't imagine him dealing with what's going on today. I just can't imagine it. When it comes to what amendments, I would say the things that need to be addressed, obviously these two Supreme Court decisions that have affected everything, needs to be a priority of the legislature. They have to get it together. I think they could, if they use some bipartisan effort, they could easily deal with these issues, easily. From a law enforcement standpoint, the de-escalation stuff, I would say, in a perfect world, I would love to see all law enforcement agencies have like mandatory jujitsu training, where they learn to handle situations and to not be so, anyway, to be able to deal with things. I think that would help to give them an edge. I think that's pretty much it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Lisa.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I think we're all horrified at the level of violence that happens, and we see it on the news every night, and sometimes it's on the roadways, and sometimes it's seemingly random shootings, and it came so close to home with that Walmart shooting that ended up being gang-related, but it doesn't really matter because there's, you know, innocent people caught in those crosshairs. And the public sentiment that was so prevalent, not so much in Skagit County. I have to preface this with, in Skagit County, our law enforcement community works so well together. They're so responsive, I think, in the social realm. But when I watch King 5 or Como 4 News, and I just think, oh my gosh, I don't want to see any part of Skagit County look like Seattle and deal with the issues that they're dealing with. So protecting our law enforcement, getting them to stay and continue to feel supported. Some of them are just retiring and giving up. We have huge gaps in our staffing in our sheriff's department and corrections office. But the great things that are happening within the broader law and justice campus is things like community court. District court judges have brought forward a diversion program even bigger than drug court, and we actually refurbished a building that was our one of the county GIS technology buildings into a community court where there are social services provided. The judge is there sitting at a table with the defendant. These are all nonviolent misdemeanors, and they get the help they need. There's food, there's tents, there's clothing. It's as much social services as it is a court of law.
Thank you. Alex.
Thank you. So I guess I want to start off agreeing with Representative Paul. Everybody deserves to feel safe and to be safe in their community, and that should be our goal. And recognize that folks are not feeling safe right now, and often with good reason. Representative Paul has done a great job of convening a bipartisan group of legislators to meet with our law enforcement agencies here in Skagit County, and we've had similar meetings up in Whatcom County and in other parts of the state to gather better understanding of the challenges that are happening. I think it's important to realize that what we're seeing in Washington is not unique. This is happening in red states and blue states across the country right now, and it really is, unfortunately, a sociological phenomenon that happens after a disaster. And we're seeing a rise in crime happen after a disaster. We're unfortunately going to see a rise in crime in Florida after the disaster that's happening there right now. So we just have to make sure that we correctly understand the nature of the problem before we try and sort of identify the solutions. So some of the solutions that I think are that we need to address in the coming year, we need to make sure we have sufficient court capacity so that justice can be fair and swift and certain. We need to make sure that our jails are to capacity. That's less of less of a problem here in Skagit County, but the jail in Whatcom County is a serious challenge, and we'll be taking that on. But we also need to make sure there's treatment and diversion services. That was why I was proud to work with Skagit County government and the Swinomish tribe to bring funding in for the Digwalik Treatment Center, which is going to be such an important part of how we help folks in recovery. And then there's some other pieces that are sort of individual patterns of crime that we need to make sure we're focused on addressing, like catalytic converters and organized retail theft. Thanks.
Thank you. For question number 3, this will be directed to the state positions. Washington State is economically attractive to new business because it does not have a state income tax. Do you believe Washington State should have an income tax and fees? If yes, do you feel this would be regressive, or would you consider other options? And we will start with Dave.
So I want to make sure I understand the question correctly. Do I support an income tax? Yeah, so no. So my concern over an income tax is that it doesn't appear to be constitutional, very divisive issue that voters have rejected a number of times in my lifetime, and I just think it's a non-starter and I don't support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex.
Thanks. So I guess I will start off by saying that Washington State's tax code is regressive and upside down and unfair, and we have a responsibility to address that. What that means is that people who earn the least, who have the lowest incomes, pay a higher share of their income in state and local taxes, and those that have the most pay the lowest share of their income in state and local taxes. That's not fair and it's not right, and we ought to fix it. I do agree with Representative Paul, though. An income tax is not constitutional and is incredibly divisive. So to me, I'm looking for other solutions that we can bring to bear to address those challenges. I was proud to support passage of a capital gains tax for earnings on stocks and bonds greater than $250,000 a year. We're directing that to early childhood education, our school systems, and to the working families tax credit or tax credit rebate for some of the lowest income families, a rebate on their sales tax paid. The other issue that I think is going to be really important, and I'll just put out there since I have a little bit of time left on the clock, is that this year we're going to be looking at tax reform on our business tax. And so we have a B&O tax right now, which I think is unfair and upside down. And so while I'm talking to the business community, I'll just say we're looking at alternatives like a gross margins tax, similar to Texas's model. And I'm very interested to hear from folks who that would directly affect. I think it's really important to make sure this community's voices are represented in that discussion. Would love to talk with folks who have an opinion on that afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you. Clyde.
So I agree with hopefully my future seatmate, Representative Dave Paul. But on my end, I also don't support raising taxes in a time when grocery prices, gas, housing is so difficult for families and challenging for families. I don't think this is the right time to raise taxes. There's no question about it. Washington State has the most regressive tax system in the United States, the most. And so this is a priority for all of us. So we need to find creative ways to not raise taxes, to ensure economic growth and job creation, but also ensuring that vital services, vital programs that everyone uses is fully funded. I'm going back to my previous statement, let's say about affordable housing, that lends to my proposal or recommendation of providing tax waivers and tax exemptions for nonprofits building affordable units. So in the end, with this proposal, we could ensure that we combat homelessness, we ensure that we provide affordable housing, but also at the same time not raising taxes for individuals. This needs to be our priority, and I'm looking forward to kind of finding more creative ways with the state legislature. Thank you.
Thank you. And then question number 3 for the county candidates. What do you feel is the biggest draw for new business to open in Skagit County, and how will you work to support that? We'll begin with Christian.
I would say number one, Skagit Valley is just a great place. I was talking to somebody over at the Farmhouse Inn and restaurant, and they're coming from, and what she was saying was, it is so nice to be here instead of where they came from. And I think the place, it's a beautiful place. I'll leave it at that. And, well, we're going to keep it that way. There's my answer.
Thank you. Lisa.
You know, coming out of business from Skagit County and being able to see what it really means, the business is our community here, and there's a lot of support through other business owners, through our ports, through very active chambers that pull those smaller businesses together. We all know that small businesses constitute 95%, so less than 100 employees. 95% of businesses are small businesses, and the ability to thrive in a community like this, the natural beauty is one part of it, but the support through our Economic Development Alliance of Skagit County and fellow businesses is also part of what makes Skagit County such a wonderful place. You know, I look at our own family, and I made the comment that they continue to spawn businesses as they spawned children back in the 80s and 90s. And it really is true, because we want to make room for those next generations to be here. We are multi-generational folks who want a place for our children and grandchildren to come back and live and thrive, and to be able to work and contribute to that. We have a lot of infrastructure through both ports, the Port of Anacortes and the Port of Skagit. We have the Skagit County through the port was ahead of the broadband issue, putting up a backbone of broadband so that private ISPs could come and provide service. The city of Anacortes was even further ahead of that. So we have a literally connected community that we're continuing to improve, and we have a place where businesses support businesses, government supports businesses, and you have open door policy in most places. So I love working in Skagit County.
Thank you. Question number 4. A common threat to business, which is cited by local business owners, is over-regulation, fees, and taxation. What is a practical solution to minimize this threat? And we'll begin with Lisa.
You know, sometimes the complaints of over-regulation have to do with requirements on growth management or shorelines protection that is evolving, and but in our state is evolving for purpose. You know, we can't keep building and discharging waste into our watershed the way that we did for so long. And so I know sometimes those are complaints about, wait, what do you mean I have to, rebuild a stormwater detention pond that I built in anticipation 24 years ago? What do you mean it's not going to work? Well, science has evolved, and we know that we have to build cleaner. We have to be responsible for our environment. We're getting no second chances here. The fees, I'll tell you, if I could fix one thing with a magic wand, and Commissioner Wiesen is here, it would be the expediency with which a permit goes out the door, because time is money. And it has been an ongoing frustration that we haven't been able to move on that as quickly as possible, but we currently have a software program for the permitting department that will bring that system into the 21st century. So really think that business owners not that they don't mind paying, but it's more tolerable to pay if you actually get the service that you're expecting in a timely fashion. And I think that probably is the biggest challenge. I do want you to know that I recognize the need for working mothers to get back to work, and the county through EDASC is supporting expansion of child care services for 10 existing businesses, just to give moms a chance who want to work to get back to work. So there are a lot of things that we can do to help make it easier for businesses.
Thank you. Alex?
Thanks for the question. So I guess I think it's really important for government to create a level playing field. So one of the things I hear from, so I used to work for a small business membership association. We had a lot of small contractors who were trying to do construction projects, and they were trying to do better than code construction, right? More energy efficient, greener design, healthier building materials, et cetera. And in many cases, they were able to pass the added cost of doing better work, longer lasting, lower impact construction. They were able to pass that on to their customers. But I mean, realistically, how many people here look at how much insulation is in the attic before they buy their home, right? There is a lot of that information that just doesn't get passed along through an efficient market mechanism. And so I think it is important for government to create that level playing field so that the folks who want to do a good job, who want to pay their employees a fair wage, living wage, that et cetera, which is the majority of business owners, aren't undercut by the folks who would cut corners. And so I think that is a critically important role. And so I would not support movement to reduce legislation that's there to maintain a level playing field. That said, I think it's really important that we figure out how to do the regulation that's necessary to maintain that level playing field in an efficient and effective way. So for example, we're looking at how do we do environmental impact statements, not for individual project developments, but how do we do those for a whole area when a community changes the zoning so that developers in that area will have certainty. I think Commissioner Janicki's point about efficacy and the pace of permitting is important. I got the first bell.
Thank you. Clyde?
So in the 10th legislative district, there are more small businesses than large businesses or large corporations. And that might mean businesses that employ 10 or less employees. So when I walk in Mount Vernon or Langley or Stanwood or Arlington, I see grandmothers and grandfathers, mothers and fathers, and sons and daughters actually working in their business because they don't have the ability to actually hire more. And the issue I really see when I talk with them is that they are overburdened with permitting, with regulations and taxes. And so I agree with Commissioner Janicki that we need to focus, we need to maintain that kind of clean energy, kind of environmentally friendly initiatives. But at the same time though, my job, and this might be more local, is to remove regulations that don't make sense. Whether you can post something or not post something, whether you can put something out of your store or not something out of your store. And we also need to make sure it's cheaper for them to, or more cost effective to have businesses. So, there are proposals out there. For example, I propose that businesses that hire veterans should have benefits, whether it's taxing benefits or other benefits that make it easier for them. We need to provide regulations that benefit them, also and that benefits the community. And so that's my hope moving forward, to work with local city officials and work with the commissioners to say, hey, these initiatives make sense and these initiatives don't make sense. Let's find some way to benefit the community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a great question. So, first I work very hard to try to listen to small business owners and to other businesses as well. In the legislature, I'm an active member in a group called the Business Roundtable, where we meet at lunchtime with business lobbyists and hear what their concerns are. And it's a diverse group. Sometimes some of the best fights in the legislature are between two business lobbyists who don't agree on what the step forward should be. I also serve on the Island County Economic Development Council and gotten to learn what small business leaders are concerned about in Island County. And Representative Ramel, I think, raises a really good point. Small businesses, the vast majority of them want to do the right thing and can get frustrated if they know of another small business that's not doing the right thing, and then that first business is paying more because of that. I would look towards business groups and advocacy groups to talk about, well, what can be done at the industry level, and then what needs to be done either at the county or the state level to make sure you have an even playing field. And then in terms of taxation, Representative Ramel brought up the bicameral bipartisan work group that is wrapping up their work right now. Senator Wagoner is part of that group that's looking at ways of reforming our B&O tax structure, which is remarkably unfair and completely makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense why one sector is taxed at one level and another sector is taxed at a different level. I think you're going to see some really good proposals coming out of that. Really excited to see that for the upcoming session. And then we had an opportunity to pass a bill, Senate Bill 5980, that provides small businesses with an exemption, or more small businesses with an exemption from that B&O tax if they're a really small organization. So thank you.
Thank you. Christian.
So I already wrote down the planning department and the permitting issue before Lisa brought it up. Just want to make sure everyone knows that. She did not see it on my paper. Didn't want to imply anything. It's not a secret. But regarding that, I've heard a lot of frustration and complaint about that backlog. And one of the things that was brought up is that when that backlog is occurring, it holds up development in the county. It holds up housing. It holds up construction. The concern for keeping, one, having good employees, but two, keeping them working. When you have employees that can't start a project because we can't get the permit. So what I'm asking for, or I feel is needed, is empathy from the people that work in those departments and the people that are in charge of those departments to figure out what's the holdup and to get after it and to actually take action to make sure that it's working well. The other thing was like, I didn't hear anybody talk about when taxes and fees when it came to the gas tax, carbon tax, and that impending thing. I think how are not just businesses, how are people going to maintain with the way the price of energy is going? And the other thing was the overregulation. A lot of times that can come in the form of people that are doing the regulating who don't understand the common sense of what it is that they're about to regulate. That's it.
Thank you.
All right.
Question number 5. What do you think is causing the staffing shortages, and how can you support the businesses through this? And we'll start with Alex.
This is going to be one of the most important things that our legislature deals with in the next year. It's going to be one of the most important things our society deals with in the coming years. I hear about staffing shortages everywhere I go. If I go to auto dealership, they can't hire mechanics. Our ferry system can't hire people fast enough. We talked about it earlier with police departments, public safety, healthcare, education, retail. This is a challenge everywhere you go right now. So there's a number of different contributing factors. I don't claim to know all of them, and I'm all ears if you've got more ideas. But some of the big challenges we're facing right now are childcare. This is folks who have not been able to get reliable childcare for the last few years. Was proud to support the Fair Start for Kids Act to help make sure our child care centers are better funded. That money is coming online and is moving us in the right direction. Also in the last couple of years, supported development of a number of child care facilities around the region, including 2 here in Anacortes. We got funding for the Anacortes Family Center and for the Samish Nation, which are both building child care facilities right now. The other thing that we hear about all the time is housing, and I think we're going to talk, I hope we're going to talk a lot more about housing later on this evening. But workforce housing in particular is a challenge that's a bigger and bigger issue for business owners who try and recruit folks who realize that if they move to this community, they won't be able to afford a place to live. We've got a lot of important pieces to take on to address the housing crisis. But really that comes down to supply, subsidy, and stabilization, and I'll get more into that later.
Thank you. Clyde.
I think this is where my youth comes in. So it's young people. I think young people not being able to successfully transition from high school or some other educational opportunity to the workforce. And I initially mentioned during my introduction that I am passionate about increasing opportunities for career trainings, for technical colleges, and for apprenticeships. We have a lot of young people who feel lost and feel forgotten, a lot of my kind of colleagues and classmates. And so I think programs with labor unions, for example, really provide that initial hands-on training for young people to become electricians and plumbers, steel workers and sheet metal workers. That's going to really provide that impetus for a lot of young people to feel involved in actually having jobs and kind of combating the staffing shortages. Second, in terms of affordable housing with Representative Rammel, it's causing a lot of young people to not want to or not be able to actually live in the location that they want to work in. Talking with farmers, both in the Skagit County area as well as on Whidbey Island, they can't hire young people because they are so far removed from that immediate area. And so I think it all links together. Giving that opportunity, the educational, career, and technical opportunities for young people, while also ensuring that they can actually live nearby where they work. Those kind of 2 variables, I think, will really help in terms of combating staffing shortages.
Thank you. Dave.
Thank you so much for the question. What a great question. So clearly, we've got a problem here. I hear this every day talking to folks in all sectors of the economy that there are staffing shortages. And there's no one answer for why that's happening, but I know from my conversations with a lot of parents and young people that they were not able to earn a living wage prior to the pandemic, and then when we had the childcare system kind of seize up during the pandemic, it just became cheaper for folks or for a second parent to stay home. And so we've got work to do on childcare to make sure that there are quality, affordable childcare in our community. We have work to do to make sure that we're working with businesses to help make sure that folks are earning a living wage so they can afford to live in our community, be able to afford that housing that Clyde and Alex have talked about that is so critical and is in such a shortfall. And then we've got a lot of exciting work to do to help connect folks with those high-paying, high-demand jobs that are out there. I see John Sternlick here, and he spoke earlier this year about we have thousands of jobs in our community that pay well above a living wage and are in demand, and young people and folks that feel stuck in a job right now, and even seniors that have stepped out of the workforce don't know exist, and we have a better job, first of all, communicating what's out there, and then helping to train them and provide them those skills to do that work. It is really a meaningful work in helping to connect young people to those careers. I'm excited to work with our K-12 educators and our career and technical colleges to help to do just that. But I think no one answer here, but working on all those issues will help strengthen our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Christian.
So when it comes to staffing shortages, I think that for some reason we have told kids that they can't work. And we've done more and more as a state to regulate teenage workers and to make it difficult for employers to hire kids. And when I say kids, I mean like 14, 15, 16 years old. If we're driving by a McDonald's and it has a big sign that says, now hiring 18 years and older, that's a problem. The fact that we have for so long made it hard for kids to work in the workforce, I think that that element is coming to roost. We've got multiple years where you can learn what it takes to be an employee that is just being taken from kids. The other issue is that it's a supply and demand issue. When the supply is low, you have to pay more money. And businesses can't afford to pay more money because they're at the edge also. So it's not an easy solution. I don't know what it takes other than lowering taxes and fees.
Thank you. Lisa?
Yeah, we really are in a staffing crisis, and I think we have to look at this with some short-term approaches and some longer-term development approaches. And, you know, I see it across many organizations where the agreement to pay out retention bonuses for certain classes of employees is happening. It was recently, there's a couple of cities who are offering $30,000 lateral transfer bonuses for law enforcement. And you think about the spiral that starts, because if you can lateral over for $30,000 and, you know, it just makes the gap bigger. But I think the most important thing, like, you know, like most businesses, how do you hold on to the businesses you have, and how do those businesses hold on to the employees they have? We may need some retention bonuses. We may also, I would encourage looking at what you're paying as fair wage. Salary studies are going on across the board, across most government agencies, and the caution with all of that is there's going to be fewer people working here. It's a finite revenue source, and but we need to pay the people who are there a fair wage. The county is under that process right now to be implemented for January 1st. Getting people back to work we've talked a lot about childcare. I won't spend a lot of time there, but we are expanding or offering expansion and looking for a business who will do worksite pilot program, and that would be funded through economic recovery dollars. And encouraging these small businesses a little longer term or medium term is how do you encourage the small businesses to be successful. And we have through EDAS, they brought COVID recovery plan, is our economic recovery plan from COVID. So bringing on an entrepreneur to entrepreneur mentoring program to keep those small businesses in place.
Thank you. Question number 6 will be just for the state candidates. Do you support eliminating some barriers for hiring youth employees, and how? We'll start with Clyde.
Yeah, I think the simple answer is yes. I'm all about eliminating barriers for better opportunities for our young folks. You know, me being in high school, working several jobs here and there provided me the opportunity to actually learn outside of the classroom, and also gave me a good work ethic that I translated to the U.S. Naval Academy several years later. I think what's important is it's always a balance, right? It's a balance on providing those additional opportunities for young people, but also to ensure that they have the benefits they deserve, the protection that they deserve as well. And this relates directly to the staffing shortage issue that I was talking about, ensuring that young people have these educational opportunities to be hired and to actually pursue potential careers or businesses that they might want to work in one day. I think the simple answer again is yes, but caveat it with make sure it's balanced, make sure that young people understand you know, their future goals, and young people are receiving the benefits and protection they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave.
Thank you, Jessica. So certainly we want to look at ways of making sure that young people have an opportunity to enter the workforce and find out both what they enjoy doing and then get paid to do that. So as Clyde mentioned, we want to make sure we're keeping young folks safe and making sure that they're working a reasonable amount of hours while they're in school. But there is so much work we could do here to help connect folks with that meaningful career. So as we're working with our career and technical educators at the K-12 level, and they've got students who are in their welding programs or in their ag programs, helping to see if there are ways to get those 16 and 17-year-olds actually doing an internship, hopefully paid, where they are actually doing welding on a job site and making sure that they're safe doing that, but getting them that opportunity. And again, that helps them understand if they really love that job and that's something that they want to pursue, and it helps businesses as well. So it's a matter of making sure it's safe and that they're protected and taken care of, but I'd love to see more opportunities for folks as 16, 17-year-olds to get those hands-on work experiences.
Thank you. Alex.
Thanks for the question. So I will say this isn't something a lot of folks have brought up to me, and wasn't on my radar as a major part of the solution to our workforce and labor challenges right now. My son is 21 now, but he was able to get a job when he was 16 and enter the workforce in a limited way while still, going to school and getting some pocket money, and would have liked to have thought some savings, but not in his case. I'm open to hearing what those barriers might be, and if we can take some of those barriers down and it makes sense and keeps kids, safe and focused on their first priority, which 16, 17 should still be focused on getting an education. But I'm open to hearing what those barriers might be. But we should be clear that this is these are not folks who are going to solve the labor shortage that we have. These aren't folks who are going to be able to fill in as police officers or teachers or nurses or many of the other fields where we really do have a crisis in the labor shortage.
Thank you. Question number 6 for the county candidates. What are your plans to improve or sustain the economic vitality in Skagit County? And we'll start with Lisa.
It seems in some ways we've touched on this this question from so many different perspectives, but the economic vitality, besides just the small businesses that we've kind of touched point on, I want to just focus on our agricultural community, our farmers and loggers. I have to say that because Mike Janicki is sitting in the room, and after being married for 40 years, I have to say ag and forestry, the both. We have to make it possible for that landscape to continue to happen. This valley is literally feeding the world, and there have been some recent very open attacks on our farmers, including a decision that was just passed down, but the 2 sites in Skagit County farmland were identified as potential green space expansions of airport for SeaTac. And the commissioners wrote a very strong letter of objection that basically said, hell no, not here. And that is really strong. Right now we're going through a moratorium process. There's an emergency moratorium on conversion of our farmland to be used for off-site mitigation for a dam project that's way upriver, 70 miles from the delta, and they want to use our farmland to pay for the fact that the fish can't get by up there, so they think this is better to develop more habitat here. And so I think the vitality of our county is we have to take care of those heritage in businesses and industries like farming and logging. We need to support, small impact of other technologies. And thank you for the question.
Thank you. Christian.
I think the most important thing is that people in the county feel safe and that they feel like it's a good place to raise their family. I think families are the, everything long-term with our county, it starts with the families. It starts with households that operate well and that can raise kids, that can do it again. They can then marry people and end up having kids and raising kids. When it comes to economic vitality, I think having businesses that are working together, I think we do this really well. And so it's basically about maintaining it, I believe. Yeah.
Thank you. Question number 7. Do you currently support refinery operations in our region? If yes, how would you work to keep our refineries current? If no, how would you replace the 1,000 plus family wage jobs lost and the increased tax burden on the community? We'll start with Dave.
Oh, thanks for the question. So yes, so much good work is being done at our refineries, and I think we only have 5 in the state, and 2 here in our community. Really good paying jobs there, and providing us the fuel we need to get around. As we're doing environmental work to help reduce the impact of carbon in our transportation sector and in our climate, the refineries are playing a key role in that. We're going to see the refineries producing more of the biofuel that's going to help reduce carbon in the cars we drive, and it's going to be a long time before we are off of petroleum products. I don't think that's going to happen in my lifetime, and we're going to need jet fuel from those refineries to help get us where we need to go. So the work we're doing is to help make sure that those refineries are producing that petroleum, those products at the cleanest way possible, and will help reduce the impact of climate change on our community. And then there's other great work that we can do to help encourage other green technology in our community, like teaching people how to install solar panels and wind turbines and repairing those that help complement the great paying jobs that are at our refinery. So thank you.
Thank you. Christian.
Yes, I do support refinery operations. I worked on a couple shutdowns a long time ago and had to go through all the safety stuff. And anyway, I can talk for 2 minutes about refineries, but no, that's it. I do go refineries.
Thank you. Lisa.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I do support keeping the refineries for many of the same reasons that Representative Paul articulated. The greater goal is to move to alternative energy sources, but I have a high level of concern about motor vehicles alone. The EVs that are coming online, our generation and transmission capability has not been proven out. It's a good idea, it's a theory, but if you talk to a linesman, which I have, who says on this block alone, we could not put a charging station at every home. You could not be charging an EV at night at every home here. So our dependence on fossil fuels is going to be there longer than we want. We need those jobs there. If I guess the part where it's conflicted for me is with carbon credits. When you give carbon credits for output that's happening at a location in Anacortes, and it's the forest that's going to be held offline from harvest, I'm not sure that we've really gained a full output. The emissions from the producers at the place it's producing makes the most sense. Just like with the dams, taking care of the fish and the fish passage at the place where the dams are impacting makes a lot more sense than converting farmland. To me, it's a direct comparison, and I see I see our refinery folks in the back, but let's clean it up where they are and when they are, and take care of the forests in a different way. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Alex?
Thanks. So, it's worth starting off saying that refineries in Washington State, from a air quality and clean water standard, are some of the cleanest anywhere in the world. And the importance to the local economy would be difficult to overstate. Those 1,000+ jobs are important, and they're some of the best paying jobs in the community. That said, the primary output right now from those facilities is, the primary input rather, is fossil fuels. And we do need in the next 30 years to transition away from using fossil fuels. And we've made a commitment in Washington State to do that. The United States has made a commitment to do that, and we're on our way moving that in that direction. And folks could disagree with with me or others on whether that's a good idea or not. But it's harder to disagree perhaps with General Motors, which has said that by 2035 they don't plan to be building internal combustion engines. Many other auto manufacturers are making similar commitments. We ought to be thinking ahead and planning ahead for how to make sure that those skills, those capital investments, those workers have a place in the future clean energy economy. And I think there are smart ways that we can get there. That's why I was proud to support the Low Carbon Fuels Act, and why I've been a proud sponsor of work to make Washington State a green hydrogen hub, so that we can make sure that we're replacing the jobs and the economic engines as that transition is happening.
Thank you. Clyde?
So I have a unique perspective on this. My fiance, who's a special education teacher, grew up in Western Pittsburgh in a family of steel mill workers, railroad workers, and power plant workers. And during that time, the steel industry abandoned Pittsburgh and moved overseas or other places in the U.S. And so because of this, her family and many other families were abandoned, forced to pick up the pieces and start over again. So I will not abandon our refinery workers. That is for sure. Now, that means instead working together, like Representative Paul said, about biofuels, or like Commissioner Janicki said, about making a robust grid. Instead of saying yes or no, it's actually how can we work together closely so that whether it's in 5, 10, 20, or 30 years, when we do change to other energy sources, that none of these refinery workers are left behind, that they have great pensions, that they have a livable wage, and they have worker safety protections. So in my mind, when an environmental bill comes on the floor, when I'm looking at a bill or about to vote, the story that I'm going to be thinking about, the person that I'll be actually fighting for, are these refinery workers just like my, hopefully, future father-in-law? Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 8. How important do you believe immigration is to the agriculture industry in your district? What problems have you identified with the undocumented in our communities, and what solutions do you support for employment of temporary non-immigrant agriculture workers? We'll start with Christian.
I'm going to have to defer this one to the local farmers. You're going to have to talk to them, and they're available to you to talk to about. I don't know all the details, but they're struggling with the same issues with workers. But as far as this goes, this question, I wouldn't have the details on this.
Thank you. Lisa.
Yeah, the current labor shortage is even more underscored by our very dysfunctional federal policies on immigration. And I was once warned not to tell the story, but I'm going to tell it anyway, because my mom immigrated from the Philippines after World War II, and I grew up in a single-parent household, and I remember that we always sponsored other Philippine families coming in, and we always called them all aunties. I thought they were all related to me by blood, but that's just what the Filipinos do. But back, so that was back in the 70s, where there was actually a way to get legal status as long as there was someone who would vouch that you had a job and a house and wouldn't be dependent on social systems at the time. We are Republican or Democrat, our Congress, our presidents can't seem to figure this out, but it really needs to be addressed as a federal issue. We have shortages in every realm, not just agriculture. It's not just bringing, our traditional Mexican families up here during seasonality. There's a need for farm workers year-round, and there are people who are going to have to be moving off of these low-level island countries as our sea level rise and our climate change really does hit so catastrophically. So my message, to Washington, D.C. is get with the program. We need a solution yesterday. And how can we, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, just be so closed door about letting people in? And we absolutely need some of these people just to keep our current level economy going.
Thank you. Alex.
Thanks for the question. I do have to acknowledge that I don't think any of us up here are running for an office that has authority to solve the immigration challenges, but 100% agree with Commissioner Janicki. This is a federal issue that our federal government has to tackle. I think Christian earlier was talking about the labor shortage in terms of supply and demand. There's folks that want to work here that can't, and we could use their help. So we absolutely should do everything we can to call on our federal delegation to continue to figure out what does it take to get federal immigration reform taken care of. And if we can't get the whole thing in comprehensive package, let's break off some bite-sized pieces and solve part of the problem this year, and we'll solve another part next year. That's the way we have to address it. In terms of the specifics for local agricultural workers, the one challenge that I think also belongs in this conversation that maybe we can do a little bit on at the state level is the challenge of workforce housing for temporary farm workers. We've excuse me, in the past 2 years, we've put additional funds into the Washington State Housing Trust Fund to support development of temporary farm worker housing, because we know that is a barrier for the agricultural sector to be able to get the workforce that they need.
Thank you. Clyde.
So immigration is absolutely critical. It's vital to our agricultural industry in Skagit. It's, immigration is also important in other areas in the 10th, for example, the Asian community with veterans, for example, myself. So to me, this is a very personal issue that I'm very passionate about. Farm workers, the Latino community, they are a fundamental part of agriculture in Skagit County. And like Commissioner Janicki said before, we feed the world. So immigration is actually one of those important aspects that feed all of us. They are public servants. So, in line with Representative Rammel, that means ensuring that they have affordable housing. That means workforce housing. And it also means simple but very important things like, are they getting the breaks they need? Are they having access to, restroom or bathroom breaks? Things of that nature. For all of us, these are very simple things, but our farm workers every day in the toiling in the heat or bitter cold, they need these protections. So I will champion each and every one of our farm workers. I will champion to make sure that they have the resources and tools they need to help us as a community. And so it really kind of transcends so many aspects. And so we need to break down these barriers and find some ways so that farm workers and farmers are supporting each other. And that's through, from the state legislature, making sure that the policies make sense for each and every person. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave.
Thank you for the question. And I'm just going to echo what Commissioner Janicki and others have said, that it's a completely screwed up, that's a polite word for what's happening at the federal level, and that farm workers and farmers deserve better than being treated like a political football by folks at the national level. Yeah, it's completely screwed up. And, you know, our farm workers deserve the right to legally have a path to enjoying the American dream that so many of our families got to enjoy. And you know, farm workers deserve to be able to live in healthy communities and have access to safe housing. And the best way you can help ensure that farm workers are treated well and not exploited is by having a better federal system that actually brings them out of the shadows. And I'd encourage our federal lawmakers to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 9. The state has adopted aggressive green energy policies that are making housing more unaffordable for working families. What amendments would you support in order to reduce the cost of these barriers for those who can't afford them during the transition to green energy goals? We'll start with Lisa.
Yeah, that's tough. Transition is always tough, but you know, I will often be heard saying, you know, don't put the cost in front of a good idea, because sometimes you have to take the good idea and make it happen anyway. So with building code that has been updated, and as it impacts particularly the affordable housing domain, this is again incumbent, I think, on the state housing to quit spending money maybe where they've traditionally spent money, kind of the idea of peeling back, so let's peel back some of those rules, but peel back some of those traditional funding sources and focus on the things that matter. And with the new building code and the emphasis on affordable housing, let's find a way to laser focus those funds there, because we shouldn't build crappy stuff as affordable housing just because the money isn't necessarily there if the renters are paying with vouchers or it's a guaranteed low income project. We need to build quality structures.
Thank you. Alex.
Thanks. So I serve on the State Building Code Council. I've been there for just over a year now, and we're in the process of developing the next round of energy codes, among other things. And it may not be common knowledge that part of that process is that every single proposal, each line item in of dozens that are developed each year, each one has to go through a cost effectiveness analysis. So while first cost is an important question, it can't be the only question, because the folks who bear the first cost are not necessarily the same people who are going to be stuck with the energy bills for the life cycle of that building or for the next couple of decades for the operation of that equipment. And so to me, the important thing is that when we're looking at costs, we're contemplating that full life cycle cost. And so I do support the amendments that have been made that are moving forward through the State Building Code Council, and support those things that are, those other measures that we know are going to bring down energy costs. So that I also worked on our state energy strategy, where we modeled a variety of different pathways to meet our clean energy goals. And the bottom line is that as we electrify more building and transportation uses, there's deep efficiency gains through those technologies. And as we do that, we anticipate that the per capita energy costs in Washington state will decline over the next 30 years by about $700 a year. There's huge savings to be had when you're looking at life cycle costs, not the sort of false economy of just looking at first costs.
Thank you. Clyde.
So in the past, I worked with an environmental stewardship program on Whidbey, and we were shaping and changing our facility, and that included heat pumps and solar panels, and it was quite difficult fundraising. The capital was just massive. But we knew that we were doing the right thing. We knew that we were going to, like Representative Rammel said, we were going to save costs. I believe, though, that we should inform people and reward them upfront, right? So while, in the end, I do believe that you will save costs over time, whether it's utility bills or other initiatives, I think people need to recognize or have that ability to say, wow, I actually saved money because I installed this heat pump on day one, or because I had this solar panel on day one. And that's my goal. My goal is to make sure that every person who does something actually feels good about it and not having to wait 10, 20 years for that reward. It's the same, it's a little bit different, but for me, it's pretty comparable in terms of providing subsidies and tax exemptions and waivers for those who want to purchase and own an electric vehicle. I mean, we see that across the U.S. where that actually incentivizes people to say, hey, I actually want to buy, this Leaf, or I want to buy this Tesla. The problem is, and I'm not from a wealthy family whatsoever, the problem is they're already expensive. So what the government needs to do, what the state needs to do, is to lower those costs, to say, hey, actually getting a heat pump would save me more money up front rather than doing some other kind of initiative. So, I want to reward people and make them feel good about actually doing environmentally friendly initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave.
Thank you, Jessica, and that's a great question. And again, I think housing affordability will be the #1 issue that the legislature works on next session. And I think the real focus of this question needs to be on what can we actually do to help improve the affordability of workforce housing. So the problem I see most is that when developers are putting in housing, they're putting in expensive housing that creates the most profit, which is their right, but we've got to do more work to help encourage small homes, starter homes, again, that are helpful for seniors that are looking to return to a single-story small house. And so anything we're focusing on here should be focused on that housing. That what can we do to help build workforce housing that helps people save money in the long term, helps our environment. I don't want to see those, that should be the focus here. What can we do to help improve that affordability of those small homes so that the most needy in our community have the ability to start building their equity by owning their house? Thank you.
Thank you. Christian.
So I think the #1 thing that we could do is to explore alternative building practices that currently are outside the building code. Our building code typically over the years, over the decades, many times is written by lobbyists when it comes to green energy policy. Like Owens Corning is going to be putting in a large amount of money into and deciding. And when we're looking at what is energy savings for a house, what does it cost to heat that home over the years? How much electricity does it take? It's not always equal to the R value in the wall or the floor or the roof. And when things are not able to be used, Skagit County was settled by pioneers 150 years ago that built log homes and they roughed it and they had a hard time. And in looking through, when homes were built, some of my favorite homes were built in the early 70s, before right before 1974. The homes are amazing. They're solid. They're built well, and they maybe didn't have as much insulation, and they could have been retrofitted. But during the 80s, building practices, we had codes that were followed for energy that, anyway. All that to say that I think that when we're talking about a smaller house for farm worker housing, for just a family that can get what they can get and what they can afford, look at what it actually costs to heat that home versus our values. I could talk about this all day. Anyway, I love it. It's my passion. One of them.
Thank you. Question number 10. It's our last question that is just for the state candidates. Legislation has been enacted to protect tenants from evictions and increase tenants' rights during and after COVID. Some cities are now attempting to pass new rent control ordinances. Do you support rent control? And if so, how will you work to support rental housing landlords and providers to protect long-term housing supply investments in our communities? We'll start with Alex.
Thanks. And just to clarify, right now, local governments don't have authority in Washington State to pass rent control. They might be asking for that authority, but I don't think any local governments have that authority right now. That is a decision that the state legislature would make. I don't support a New York-style rent control program. What I would support in this space that I think is meaningful and significantly different would be a cap on the increase of the rent for existing tenants. There's a lot of details that I don't have time to get into there, but I think something like that would avoid situations like the young man I talked to a couple of weeks ago. He's in his 20s and his rent went from $1,200 to $1,800 a month in the course of 1 year. Those kinds of rental increases are not uncommon as you walk around neighborhoods in the 40th District. And those are huge impacts. They're driving folks away and they're making it hard for new folks to come, and it's contributing to our workforce challenges. That is not the only solution to our housing crisis, though. And to your point, I think it's important. We need to build more housing. And so to me, that looks like allowing more housing forms, what we call missing middle housing, things like townhomes and row houses and condominiums, duplexes in more parts of our communities so that we were able to build more of those types of homes. Was proud over the last couple of years to work on reforms to our multifamily tax exemption program to start to address some of these challenges and create incentives for building more housing and more workforce housing. And if I get to go back, I'm looking forward to continuing to work on things like that and things like condo liability reform so that we can see more housing forms and types. Thanks.
Thank you. Clyde.
So I support Representative Ramels in terms of capping. I don't support rent control. I think there is a challenge when we talk about capping, though. And that challenge comes from what's happening now. So for example, in Island County, in Skagit and Snohomish, we have corporations, banks, and wealthy individuals who are buying multiple properties. And without, Representative Alex Ramel and kind of my support in terms of capping rent could just skyrocket. And so we need to discourage and disincentivize people who have no disincentivization of capping to actually, have houses and rental properties that are affordable for young people and for old folks. So I think capping really is that fine balance. It provides everyone to actually share in being able to live in the community. So I do support capping rent, and I don't support rent control. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave.
Thank you so much. And it seems like an odd question in some ways. I appreciate the question, but I've talked to lots of local officials. I've not had one elected official ask for this. I'm not aware of any major proposal to address this issue. I don't support rent control. And I think that there are, we have, again, a housing affordability crisis, and we should be working with our city and county officials to figure out ways of helping to improve the supply within our communities. And as Rep. Ramel said, talking about ways of improving duplexes, smart ways of doing ADUs, accessory dwelling units. And I really am proud of the work being done in many of our communities on those issues already. So I don't think this is a major concern. I don't support it. I don't see it coming forward in the upcoming legislative session at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 10 for just the county candidates, and this is the last question. What are your plans, if any, to provide funding to assist Skagit County businesses in transitioning to meet the new green energy mandates? And we'll start with Christian.
So I haven't looked at the county budgets, and I don't know how much money is available to do that. But when I'm in office, I would be able to look at that. I'll be able to see where, what's available and work with the other county commissioners and find out what the best use of those funds would be. I don't personally know what the best use of those funds would be at this time.
Thank you. Lisa.
So I'm going to say I agree with Christian. That's the only time I'm ever going to say that.
No, we have lots of common ground.
We currently do not have a policy statement on financially supporting businesses for the upgrade to green energy. So I'm happy to have that conversation more broadly with people who have ideas, but that one has not come forward. So
thank you. So for the next part of the forum, we have the candidate-to-candidate questions. It is open for those who have their opponent here. Each of you will be given 1 minute to ask a question of your opponent. Please limit your response to 1 minute as well. We'll start with Lisa with the first question.
all right. So I have 6 to choose from. Do you want to just pick a number? I can read it to you.
You pick the best one.
Okay. So how has COVID-19 improved or diminished participation in local governments? And if elected, what would you change with the commissioner's agenda and public meeting formats? Sure. It's number 2.
I would say, as far as improved, I think the number of people that are interested in local government has significantly increased because of COVID-19. What would I change about the commissioner's agenda public meeting formats? I don't know that I would change anything. I think the format actually works really well. I think maybe more discussion about the topic because a lot of things get voted on, but they're not really discussed in front of the people that's on when it's being publicized, just because a lot of things have already happened in the background. And so when it's, I think maybe, but then again, I don't know how many people watch those, so I don't know.
Thank you. Now, Christian, your question.
All right. So this is a question about our district and the Elk upriver. The question is, what steps have you taken in the past 2 to 3 years as county commissioner to help citizens and farmers that are dealing with food security issues associated with the damage from the elk herd and the hoof rot infection that's being spread to livestock and farms, and that has made crop farming very difficult in our area?
So the elk, that is a mixed response, because for those who really want to keep the elk out of their lands, we have people who love going up and watching the elk and seeing them, the majesty of the herd kind of moving through ground. So what I have done, I supported the current assessor's survey. We met to discuss what questions could we ask the ag NRL, the agriculture owners, questions about quantifying their damages to the land, and so that there would be actually data to move forward. When we met with Department of Fish and Wildlife, I've participated in multiple meetings with the Department of Fish and Wildlife and with a number of the Cattlemen Association members on what to do. And as you know, there have been many presentations to the commissioners, but the herd is co-managed by the tribes and Fish and Wildlife.
Thank you. Now for our closing statements, we'll go in reverse order. Please limit your statement to 1 minute, and we'll start with Dave.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you for the Anacortes Chamber of Commerce for hosting this forum. It's been really wonderful to see everybody and to see my colleagues, and thank you so much. So I have served 4 years in the state legislature. I would be honored during your vote and serve an additional 2 years. And I really worked hard to listen to folks and then hear those concerns and then advocate on their behalf in Olympia. And the work that we're hoping to do next year, I think, addresses what we're hearing as we're talking to voters, helping to deal with affordability. I had a bill last year to help provide a sales tax holiday that passed the House and died in the Senate. It was really supported by small businesses. I'm really looking forward to working on healthcare again, committed to helping protect women's reproductive health and lowering healthcare costs in the upcoming session. Again, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk this evening with folks, and I'd be honored during your vote. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Clyde.
Thank you so much for hosting, and thank you everyone for being here. Going back to my intro, let's vote for the candidate who exemplifies lifelong public service, the candidate who served in the Navy for almost a decade, who protected our environment by studying law and working with the Natural Resources Defense Council and RDC. And I think it's very telling that our three opponents aren't here. We are here in front of you, going to your doors, calling you to make sure that we hear you, to make sure that those who feel lost and forgotten, that we can understand them, their issues and their concerns. As the only pro-choice candidate running for this position, I am here to fight for you, fight for your rights, to make sure that the government isn't going into our business with private health care decisions. So let's vote for the candidate, not for just one party. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex.
Thanks, and thanks again for hosting this event. I would be honored to continue to have folks support and to be returned to continue to serve the community for another 2 years in Olympia, and I was humbled by the support that we received in the primary. Thanks for everybody who contributed and helped out along the way. For me, legislating really is a team sport. This is work we have to do in collaboration with each other, whether that's working closely with other legislators, with our seatmates, my colleagues in the 40th District, or with local government leaders in the community. This is a job that's about connecting with other folks and understanding the issues as deeply as possible before we make our decisions and cast our votes. That's my commitment, and I believe that that commitment to working collaboratively has been reflected in the support that we've seen so far. Thanks again for hosting tonight.
Thank you. Lisa.
Yeah, good evening, and I also want to add my thanks. It has been a joy to serve you as the county commissioner from District 3. I don't always get to give or deliver the answer that a member of the public wants to hear, but I can tell you that I will listen to our staff. There's so many different topics that come before our county commissioner, and that learning curve is steep. I'm probably the most proud of the relationships that we have built, not just at the state level here, and we really do have champions within our districts, but with the mayors and that police chief group that I told you about. That was the brainchild that brought forward the First Step shelter when Mayor Sexton proposed that, and that is the group that is now working through the mental health and homelessness project called North Star. I would love to have your vote. to continue that good body of work. Thank you.
Thank you. Christian.
Thank you so much for having us here. It's been a great time, and I've appreciated the thoughtful questions. I think one of the things that we're facing as a society, as a county, it seems like things are getting worse. And I don't believe, I'm an optimist, and I believe that I think that there are solutions that we're not going for. And I think that the commissioners have done their best. They've worked hard. But I think that as the commissioner board, we need to stand up more. And when it comes to different things where we get pushback from the state on issues of wildlife or pretty much when we get that pushback, we need to be able to, as a commissioner board, push through and to be able to, at times, push back ourselves and not just take the answer that we're given.
Thank you. Thank you all for participating. Can you please give them a round of applause for making it a priority to be here today? Our goal today was to present a fair and impartial format that will aid citizens in their decision-making process. Your vote is extremely important. Weigh your choices carefully, and please remember to vote by Tuesday, November 8th. A couple of acknowledgments to wrap up. I want to say thank you to all of the candidates. Best of luck to all of you. To the Government Affairs Committee and Chamber staff for their work on behalf of the Chamber and businesses in the Anacortes area. The City of Anacortes for the use of this facility and technology. And thank you to Mitchell with the City of Anacortes for airing these forums on Comcast Channel 10 and live streaming on the city's YouTube channel. It will be available tonight. Upcoming events are the Chamber Luncheon and Candidate Roundtable will be the second Thursday on October 13th at Seafarers. And then we also have our after hours at Wellness for Life on the 20th. Thank you all for coming, and please remember to vote by November 8th.